Hey everybody, this is David again, and today I'm going to talk about a project that is pretty near and dear to my heart here. This is a custom module I've been working on called Hellofixit, and it's a side project. I've been working on it for going on about 6 months, whenever I can scrape together an hour, nights and weekends. So let's just jump right in here. Well, again, my name's David, and I've been working with Drupal since about 2013. One of the things that always fascinated me for some reason was I wanted to be able to build apps that sent and received text messages and just didn't send messages, but actually did things with them on the receiving end, on the server side. So anyway, that's what I started to do with the Twilio API module here a couple years ago, and I ended up with this project, which you can see the source code is available on my GitHub repo, and also if you have any questions, my email is right here. Okay, and this is a little bit of an odd project for Drupal. One of the things that you'll learn as you go through is this is not meant to be just a website. With Drupal, now you're building websites. You're basically building a company's site or an organization's site, somebody who has a lot of content and they want to put it on the web. Well, in this case, like I said, users are interacting with it by text messaging. So it's a little bit of a different animal. So I am interested in what other people think in the Drupal community. I'm interested in, number one, whether you think it's interesting. And I'd like to hear about whether you think this fits into the overall Drupal universe and where. So one of the questions you may come up with as we go along is, why would somebody even use Drupal for a project like this? Well, the answer to that is pretty typical. What are the things that you normally think of when you think of Drupal? Well, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I don't want to write any more custom code than I have to. And that's one of the things that attracted me to it. And of course, I need a content management system because these text messages that are coming and going, well, they amount to the same thing as content. So I need a way to manage that content. And the other thing, of course, like I mentioned, is the Twilio API module, which is great, and it's a breeze to set up, and it's a breeze to be able to use to send and receive messages to our system. Okay, and just as a quick aside, one of the things that seems to have happened this year is chatbots became really huge, and a huge buzzword at least. And I just wanted to say that any resemblance is purely coincidental. This was not on my mind when I started this project, and well, it's just kind of an interesting aside. Okay. Well, back to the text messaging aspect. When users are using the Hellofixit module, are they aware, or do they even care that they're actually dealing with a website on the other side of their phone? Because like I said, 99% of the time, these people are never going to go on the website, or at least that's the intention. So do they even care? Probably not. So I want to make sure that it's as intelligent on the back end as possible. So what is the motivation for this project? Well, over the years, I've been a property investor on the side, and one of the problems that I always run into is hiring contractors to work on my rental properties or a property I want to fix up. And there always seems to be this huge problem. There's like a law of physics somehow that when you want to hire a contractor, you go out, you leave 20 voicemails, and you get a call back. Maybe, if you're lucky. Then you maybe leave 20 more voicemails and you get another call back. And if you're lucky, after that, you get a couple people to come and show up and look at your job. And if you're even luckier beyond that, maybe one of them actually does the job and does it well, and you pay them, and it's, a good situation. Okay, so that's the way that people do it. That's the way that people find contractors when they're going on Craigslist or Angie's List or Yelp or whatever the case may be. Well, why don't we think about this for a second? It is pretty time consuming to actually do it that way. So if we were to come up with an alternative approach, what would it look like? How about this? You send a message about your job, you send a photo of it, and you send a 10-word description of it to Hellofixit. And Hellofixit finds a contractor for you that is not only close to you, but also has the time to come look at it in the immediate future. Okay, so how would that work? Let's check out an example. So here's the example that I like to use is, let's say you have a fence that needs to be fixed. You take a picture of it, which you can see here, and you come up with a message, and your message is really simple. It says, I need my fence mended. Okay, and you send that off to Hellofixit by text message. Okay, and Hellofixit receives it, and it reaches into its hat, its database of fix-its, or contractors, as you may call them, and it finds the first one at random, and it happens to be Bob, let's say. So Bob gets the message, and he's standing there, and he looks a little bit busy here, but he gets the message on his phone. It says, here's a job you may be interested in taking a look at. If you are available to go look at it within the next 3 hours, reply with the word fix it. You have 10 minutes. And then Bob sees the rest of the message, which is what you sent in, the customer sent in, says, I need my fence mended, and he sees the picture. But, however, it kind of looks like Bob's a little bit occupied right here, because, look, he's standing on the window ledge. He's talking on the phone to, I don't know, another customer, or maybe he's talking to his girlfriend, who knows. And also, I'm not even going to start in on the possible OSHA violations, so, in this picture. So 10 minutes goes by, and guess what happens? Well, Hellofixit says, we've given Bob enough time, let's give somebody else a try. So it reaches back into its hat, and the next person it pulls out at random is Fred. So Fred is kind of in a little bit of a different situation here. Fred sees this message come over, and he says, wow, this is kind of interesting. You know, I don't have a lot going on today, as you can see from the picture of Fred. And he says, I am sitting around thinking about how I'm going to make some money, so why don't I go ahead and go take a look at this job. So Fred turns around, he sends a message, a reply, and he says fix it, which tells the system, okay, Fred wants to go take a look at this job. And the system turns around and sends him a confirmation a minute later, and it says, here's the cell phone number of the customer, which you can see at the bottom of the message. And it reminds Fred, okay, they're expecting you within the next 3 hours. Next message that goes out is to the customer. So that's to us. And we get a message saying, we found a fix-it who wants to come look at your job. And we also get Fred's cell phone number, so we can reach out to him because we're going to need to give him our address. Okay, so now that we've run through that small example, let's ask ourselves, why in the heck would somebody build this kind of an app using text messaging? Why not just build an app like everybody else in the world does? Well, let's think about who our audience is. Well, number one, you have our customers, which those are usually going to be homeowners, and that's great because they have smartphones and they're used to using them. They're probably office workers or what have you, and they download apps and they fill in forms and they do all these kind of things on a regular basis. Perfect. However, on the flip side, you have the contractors or the fix-its, which here's my experience over the past, I don't know, since about 2005. These guys are not, especially the 1- and 2-person operations, they're not tech savvy at all. They may have a smartphone, but for a lot of these people, filling in, let's just take for an example, filling in a Craigslist form on their website to post an ad to advertise and market their business. Well, a lot of these folks, even that simple act of posting an ad on Craigslist is actually a really big hurdle for them, at least in their minds. So they just don't do it a lot of times. So what I'm targeting here is small contractors who may or may not have smartphones, but even if they do, it's kind of too much of a pain in the neck or too much of a hurdle for them to actually interact with an app. So what I want to do is go to where they are. I want to go to their level and use text messaging, which is something that every contractor I've ever worked with has been very proficient with. So, okay, what's the result of designing a system? What's the result of making a decision to use text messaging instead of a regular app? The result of that is that you take all the work that you would have normally spent designing a UI and you shift it all to the back end because you need processing to be able to figure out what the text messages are and what they say. So they come in, you have to figure out what they say, you have to figure out what to do with them. So how do you make all these decisions? Well, what I ended up doing after a bunch of trial and error was I just used filters. And I tried to make the system as expandable and flexible as possible so you can change around the filters and reorder them and make different filters and add new filters whenever you wanted to. But basically it's just a list of filters. So we're going to dig into this using the example that I had a minute ago. So I need my fence mended. Well, what are the filters for that? So the first thing we look at is, okay, is this from a previous customer? Is this from somebody that's already in our database? How about, is it somebody just giving us their zip code? We want to have everybody's zip code because that's how we figure out whether we're going to send the message to Bob or Fred or Harry or Sally, because let's say Harry is 200 miles away. Well, we don't want to relay the job to him because it's going to be too far away for him to come look at. What about if it's a fragment? Let's say somebody sent in a job description that was more than 160 characters and it got broken into 2 messages. Well, we don't want to treat the second message like it's a whole new job. So let's account for that. What about if it's just a new contractor or a new fix-it sending in a message saying, add me to your database? We don't want to treat that like a new job either. So the last thing that happens is, if none of those are true, we basically say, okay, this is probably a new job. And how does it look in the code? Well, we have this settings file where the list of filters lives. And here it is. This is basically the ones that the module comes with. So you have everything from spam to contractor taking a job to feedback and is it an existing person, etc. And all the way down the bottom, you have new job. And what happens if the system decides that it's a new job is that it sets the value in the array to 1. All right, well, that's great, but how does that get executed? Well, we have a class for texts coming in. So if new text comes in, this class gets instantiated and boom. Here's an example, or actually, here is where all the action happens. Basically, you loop through that array we saw a second ago, and you loop through it twice because guess what? Not all filters are created equal. You have level 1 and level 2 filters. Let me get into that a little bit. Why do you have 2 levels of filters? Well, you can't directly make an observation or make a measurement that says, okay, yeah, this text is a new job. You have to make a deduction. So you have these 2 different kinds of filters. And here's that same array that we looked at a second ago in the settings file. And as you can see, the part of the array that's on the top here is the level 1 filters. And those are the ones where you can make a direct observation and make a decision on whether they're true or not. But the ones on the bottom are the level 2 filters, and those are the ones where you have to make a deduction. So, okay, let's look at an example. I won't take you through all of them, obviously, because it'll take too much time. But let's look at an example of the filter where it's trying to figure out whether somebody is taking a job. So let's say Fred sends back that message with the word fix it. Well, this is where all the action happens for that. So what you can see here is a SQL query. And what that SQL query does is it says, did we send this person a message within the last 10 minutes? And was that message a job? And if the answer is yes, then keep going. If it's no, then just continue on, skip everything else. But so in this case, the answer to that question is yes. And the next determination that it makes here is, does it contain the word fix it? So Fred can text back whatever he wants, but as long as the message contains the word fix it, then it's good. It'll mark him saying that he wants that job. Okay. Now, what happens on the level 2 filter is kind of simpler, actually. So level 2 filters only get looped through once you have gone through all the level 1s. And so you have all the data from the level 1. So you're going to make your decision based on those results from the level 1s. So the first thing you see here is it spam? Basically, we looked in our database to decide, did this come from somebody that we know as a spammer? Is it feedback from a customer? Well, no, it's not, so let's keep going. If it's a take job, then we would exit this method, so it's not a take job, so let's keep going. Is it an add to job? In other words, what I was talking about earlier where a message fragment comes in. So if a message fragment comes in, it's smart enough here to just add it to the existing job that we already have. Does it contain the string contractor? This is where we would just add a new contractor to the database. Is it somebody sending in their zip code, and so on. So none of these happen to be true in this case. So what happens at the very end is you set the value of new job to 1 and we treat it as a new job. Boom, good to go. What happens at the very end, like I said, is you have the same array that you started with, except in this case you have 2 things that have values set to 1. So as it turns out, we're an existing customer in that example, and it decided we're already in the database, as you can see. It decided, yes, we did send in a new job. Oh, and by the way, our node ID in the database is 11, as you can see at the bottom. So, okay, that's all well and great. That's how the example works all in the back end. So what happens after that processing takes place is you go through one more step. The admin has to take a look at it just to make sure that it's not spam from a new person. And finally, if that gets approved, then you start relaying to Fixits, and it goes to Bob, and then it goes to Fred, like I showed you. Okay, well, we've gone through an example. I've showed you how it works on the back end. So let's take a step back into the big picture and say, does this kind of module belong in the contrib universe at any point in time? Well, to decide that, I would probably ask a few more questions. So what is this module? What does it do, and who is it good for? So what it is, again, it's a communications tool. You're talking about sending in a message and it's relaying to someone else, and it's doing it one at a time, one person at a time, every 10 minutes. But it just so happens that if someone doesn't reply, then you're actually sending it to many people. So it's sort of a one-to-many communications tool too. What are the advantages for a business or an organization using this to operate it? You don't have a UI, like I mentioned. You don't have to do that kind of design. The coding is fairly minimal. You basically just have to think about your workflow. So what is the end result? Let's say if the end result is you are trying to find a contractor, then you work backwards and you figure out all the possible things that could happen between somebody sending in a message and finding a contractor and matching it up. So you have to think about that and write all those steps down so you can design your filters. Okay, and now who is it good for? Well, sharing economy. I mentioned a buzzword earlier with chatbots. I'm going to throw in one more buzzword into this presentation, which is sharing economy. And guess what? This is not going to be that same kind of sharing economy application that everybody thinks about. So what happens when you summon up a car to drive you across town? How many degrees of freedom, how many variables are there for the service provider to actually make decisions? Well, in picking you up and driving you across town or the airport, there really are none, because all they have to do is pick you up and then follow their GPS, and then boom, they're done. But with a business like contractors, there actually are gazillions. Let's just say there's a gazillion variables, because the contractor has to make all these decisions along the way. It's a complicated process, it's a complicated business, and it takes a pretty high skill level to fix things and build things. But on the other hand, you have businesses that are not necessarily tech savvy, because their idea of tech is to run a table saw. I mean, that's what they're into. They're not necessarily into using technology in the form of computers, phones, apps, and so on. That's really not their thing. The other advantage, or the other people who might be interested in using it, are people with poor cell phone service. Maybe they don't have 4G, maybe they don't even have 3G, but they can still use text messaging. And who knows, maybe even in the developing world, that would be something that people would want to use. So as a closing slide here, what I did was take a bunch of random countries with their languages lined up here, and thinking that maybe some of them would be from the developing world, but who knows? Somebody came along and pointedly reminded me that Estonia is not a developing country, so I apologize for that to any Estonians out there. So again, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to send an email to that email address in the very beginning and let me know what you think. So thanks for watching.